Well, welcome everyone back to the basics of residential green building. We're going to continue our fourth uh, pillar of green, which is water. And we're going to continue discussing the water conservation, where we first went into, in the last session, testing, as well as getting into some of the devices such as toilets. So we're going to continue to move forward from there. So next up on our list of water using devices, as far as on average how much water they use, is going to be shower heads. They're second place on average. And so a couple things you have to consider with shower heads are of course, the flow rates. So these are rated at GPM, otherwise known as gallons per minute. So typically, you're going to see most of the time 2.5 is sort of your higher end, then 2.2 gallons per minute, then 2 starts to kick in for the green programs, 1.75, 1.5, and then ideally we'd like to see shower heads down to 1.25 gallons per minute. Now, sometimes you've got clients who've got the really high-end shower heads, really high flow shower heads, Niagara Falls coming down on you. And sometimes you've got the double or even triple shower head scenario. So those are all going to significantly increase the rate of the water flow, for these types of things. And so there are things like flow restrictors that can reduce water. There are shower starts that can at least reduce energy wasted in the water. And that's why we've got the sun logo up there, because the other benefit to reducing water and using less is also reducing the demand for hot water in the shower, which is also going to go back to our energy section and reduce energy use. We've got the health logo up there too, just because depending on the water that's coming into the project, it will basically gasify any kind of heavy metal or toxic chemical or bacteria in the water and put it into the air potentially. So there are, if you don't have whole house filters like we talked about in health, there are shower filters that can be used at the shower to reduce chlorine or other heavy metals that might get caught up in the shower while it's being used. And again, with showers, and we're going to get into water performance, you're talking about the trade-offs. So if you do have clients who want to use those high flow showers, you can use water performance to find water savings elsewhere. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Next up are faucets. So bathroom aerator, bathroom faucets, kitchen faucets. On the bathroom side, we're looking at around 2.5 gallons per minute GPM, 2.2. 2, it starts kicking in for the green building programs, 1.75, 1.5, 1 gallon per minute. 0.5 is kind of where we really like to see these aerators at, and you don't even notice the difference if you've got correct water pressure. And then we've even seen some down to 0.38, believe it or not. And whether those work or not is to be determined. In the kitchen, you're kind of looking at 2.5 gallons per minute, 2.2, maybe 2. We're seeing a lot of 1.8s now, and again, we want to ideally see them down to 1.5 gallon per minute in the kitchen. And we've got the energy logo there because we want to confirm that you will also save energy at the water heater by using less water. All right. And then next up on our list for water using devices is the clothes washer. So clothes washers, you're going to have some energy and some health issues as well. You want to look for Energy Star clothes washers, which are also going to help reduce water usage. So clothes washers, we're looking at the IWF, or the water factor, or international water factor, as your metric. So trying to get that down to ideally somewhere around 5, if not lower, is I believe where you want to be. I think it's somewhere around 5 or 6 is where Energy Star kicks in. The other thing to consider with energy is peak load. So again, reminding you, when we talked about back at the energy pillar, you want to make sure that you've got the not only a water saving device, but one that also can be ran at off-peak times on a timer base so that it will run later. And the front loaders always, on average, save more water than the top loaders. But we've got the little health sign there because what happens on those front loaders is in the lip, water can get caught. And if you keep the door closed on a lot of these models, it can build up into like mold or mildew. So watch out for that. Next up on our list of water using is actually leaks. So not unintentional water usage. And these are a big issue, not just for wasting water, but you've got the health logo and the durability logo there. You've got rotting walls, you've got rotting floors, rotting ceilings when you've got leaks. And then once they start rotting, they start to gather mold and mildew and causing all sorts of health issues. So it's a huge win for 3 different pillars if you can resolve water leaks and test for them and make sure that they're not occurring in a project when you're doing a project. All right, so the clothes washer or the dishwasher by far is one of the least water using devices on average in most homes. And the theory behind the dishwasher was that it would on average save more water than attempting to wash by hand. But some studies are coming back to say that maybe that wasn't the case, and that hand washing, especially if you hand wash efficiently, could win out against the dishwasher. So just something to think about. Just like our friend, the clothes washer, you're looking for Energy Star certification to save water. You're looking for something called GPC, gallons per cycle. And you're looking for somewhere to be around, the 4 or 5, maybe 2 or maybe 3 gallons per cycle around the Energy Star to be efficient. I've got the health logo there because you're looking at DBA, remember, back to the health section. You're looking at how noisy these things are, especially in open floor plans. They can reduce health and comfort by being too loud. And then also you're looking at peak load. So again, you want to be able to set it and forget it, walk away and have it run at an off-peak time to save energy as well. So like I said, Energy Star certifies the machines, the dishwashers, the clothes washer, but WaterSense certifies mostly everything else. And I suspect that we'll be certifying those machines as well sooner than later. But your toilets, your shower heads, your aerators, look for WaterSense certification on all of those to make sure that they're actually going to perform what they're rated at to save water, just like you would for Energy Star. So as I mentioned, irrigation, irrigation can be half or more of all water use, especially if you're talking about in an area like, let's just say Texas, where you've got, drought conditions, or Arizona, where you've got drought conditions, and you've got a lot of landscape, maybe several acres. You're talking about massive amounts of water in those cases. Now reverse that, come up to here to Grand Rapids, urban infill Grand Rapids, small, 1/10 of an acre lot where you've got a little patch of grass. You ain't using any water on that thing. So it really just depends. So in general, indoor water usage is higher than outdoor, but it also gets very subjective. So the number 1 tip for irrigation outside is to not water the sidewalk. It's one thing that drives me crazy. I literally just saw it today on a drive where I was driving around, and I saw the sprinkler spraying out, watering most of the road. And I question to myself, will that help the road grow or get stronger? I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe there's something I don't know. But that's your tip number 1. Looking at weather control, rain monitoring, head-to-head coverage, drip irrigation, zoning. What are some other ways that you could think of that might save water? Maybe pause it and drop some comments down into the comment section on some different ways you're using to save water. All right, well, thank you if you participated there. Love to hear from all of you so we can learn. And then we've got a little link down there to the EPA WaterSense program on how to better do irrigation. They got a ton of resources. Now, the question is, of course, do you even need irrigation at all? And it's becoming, apparent that we really don't. In many cases, it's expensive. It ends up leaking. And so xeriscaping is the word, trying to use landscaping that doesn't really demand any water, if not a minimal amount of water at all. Now, you still got to assume some hand watering in those cases, especially to get the landscaping up and going for the first year or two. But once it's deeply established and rooted in place, you can effectively have landscaping that uses very little water. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next session in place. All right, so that's going to conclude the sort of water using applications of homes. What thoughts do you have? What kind of water are you seeing being used? Are you monitoring water to figure out how much is being used? And are you seeing different numbers in your projects? Or what are you doing? We'd love to hear from you down in the comment section below if you'd like to talk a little bit more about that. All right, so let's get into evaluating homes. So the first thing we can do, if you've got existing properties and you're developing a new one, or you've got on an existing home, like take a look at the water bills, just like we talked about with energy efficiency. You want to take a look at those existing water bills. How much water did you use? And why are you using that to give you a sense for how to plan to make improvements? Doing inspections and evaluations. We talked about the energy efficiency audit, the home energy rating. We talked about the health audit. We talked about durability evaluation. So again, while the auditor's in there, make sure to incorporate water conservation within the audit, within the green home inspection process. During that audit, you're going to do pressure testing, and you're going to get a sense for what the pressure is coming into the building. On a new construction, we're looking for the plumber to do something called the line pressure blowout. They should always be doing that, and then signing off on a document or recording their results on what they're seeing to make sure when they're walking away from a project, there's not a leak on a new construction. So we really want to see 50 to 60 PSI as our target pressure area. Under 50 PSI, of course, you've got low water pressure, so it's not going to be comfortable or enjoyable. There could be leaks because of low water pressure, and it's just going to be annoying. Not something we're looking at from the green side, other than maybe detecting leaks. Over 60 PSI, you're going to have bad water pressure, and especially over 80 PSI, which is going to increase the flow rates of all those devices we just discussed earlier, and waste water and waste energy. So when you're in there doing your testing, go ahead and set one of these pressure devices. You can set it up outside, use a little hose, set it out on the spigot, put the pressure on. When you start your audit, get the pressure initially, and then walk away. Keep the water running. Don't use any water. When you're done with your audit, 30 minutes or an hour later, check the pressure. Did the pressure drop? That might mean there's some leaks going on in the system. And when there are leaks, there's a lot of different ways you can identify those leaks. One idea here is dropping food coloring into the toilet and then seeing if it moves on its way down the bowl, and that could be a potential leak. But look up other ways to establish ways to determine leaks, or work with a plumber to do that. While you're doing your evaluation, you're going to be looking at the flow rate of devices, looking for the labels on those devices. You're going to be looking at the labels stamped on toilets, labels stamped on the washer. And if you can't find something, especially for the shower heads and the aerators, you can do a test. Put a picture down, start testing, test it up to 10 seconds, and then divide by or multiply by 60. That gets you your gallons per minute. And then from there, you can do some math to determine what the flow rate is. So we have a link in there to a reference source that tells you how to do this kind of testing, that you can check it out if you need to. And then ultimately, besides just certifying entire homes, devices, just like Energy Star certifies devices. Yeah, WaterSense certifies devices, but just like Energy Star, WaterSense also certifies entire homes and entire multifamily buildings. So we highly encourage, if you want to step up your water game, get WaterSense certification. They just released a new version 2, which actually has more performance-based metrics involved in it rather than just prescriptive. And that's really important, again, when you're trying to make those informed decisions about how and where to use water. So like I said, going back to the shower example we used, if you've got clients who love high flow showers, well, let's say, okay, let's find ways to save water somewhere else. Let's reduce water in the toilet, the aerators, the landscape outside. We'll find a way to save water, much in the same way, if you've got someone who's got really thick insulation, but they don't have great windows, well, you can just improve your insulation, your air sealing. It's the same as an energy model. Conversely, we see a lot of low-income housing projects really nervous about low-flow toilets. So again, they might say, okay, we're going to keep the toilet normal, but let's save water by reducing the shower head flow and the aerator flow and the irrigation again. So there's those trade-offs. So we're going to get a little bit into how those work specifically. This is a tool we've created. It's part of our GreenStar Homes certification, and you can find it on the 3rd tab, at least of the recording of this video. It's called the Home Water Score. It's official certification you can get as part of GreenStar or as a standalone. And so the Home Water Score allows you to make that performance-based decision based on what's important to your clients. So you can see here, we're in the tool now in the Google Excel on the 3rd tab, water score. We have a whole webinar on this, so I'm just going to briefly go over it. But like I mentioned, let's say you've got a situation. So in the green here is where you can manipulate the numbers. Let's say you have a situation where for GreenStar you have to achieve a certain home water score. You just want to do it in general. So it comes with sort of the basic average numbers that we typically see here in green, and you can change those. So again, let's say you got a client who loves their showers and, they've got 6 shower heads or whatever, and it brings it up to, 5 gallons per minute. Well, let's say you're like, okay, well, we're going to reduce the toilet flow to 0.8, our favorite. We're going to reduce the kitchen aerator to 1.5. We're going to reduce the, sorry, that was the bathroom, the kitchen here, bathroom to 0.5. We're going to reduce the clothes washer down to 5 to Energy Star and 4 for Energy Star, and have 0 leaks. And boom, if you're trying to get to GreenStar, I think silver, then you've hit your score there, and your client's kind of got their favorite shower head. You can see it's using a lot of water, but they've made up for it another way. So that's kind of how this is an elementary way to say how these performance tools work. Now, the next performance tools we're going to get into are much more robust and have a lot more detail, and they get much more granular than this one, but this is a really good starting place. So next up is our friends over at ResNet. And ResNet, as we discussed in the first session, manages the HERS index rating for energy, but they have now created something called HERS H2O for water conservation. So it's a whole performance-based water conservation tool that can be used in design, to use to verify compliance, and then used for confirmation of water use at the end of a project. And so we have a whole webinar on that you can access and learn more about. It's being brought to Canada as well. One of the downsides is it doesn't have any assessment for rainwater or gray water. Our friends over at the Green Builder Coalition launched the Water Rating Score, or WERS rating. They were one of the first agencies out the gate to do this, and they have one of the most robust water conservation tools that is been codified in many states, incentivized in many states, looking at Canada now too. I know in New Mexico alone, it's in the code in the state, and then there's incentive for it in Santa Fe, just as an example. So this is a cool tool that we highly recommend for rainwater and gray water catchment calculations. And we have a whole webinar that you can check out on that. And then also we've got a webinar, if it's not already done yet, depending on when you're watching this, coming up with our friends over at the Home Innovations Lab with the WRI, or Water Rating Index. This is not a standalone tool, unlike the other three I showed you. This tool must be used in corporation with the certification standard, National Green Building Standard. But again, it's a 0 through 100, 0 being net zero water, 100 being a typical home. And it's a water rating system that looks at rainwater capture, I believe, and gray water usage. Now take a look there. This is an example of a device that I have, but there are many devices like this. And the whole idea is considering innovation in water. So, you know, water performance really is going to be the next innovation. But then after that is actually tracking water in real time, just like we're starting to track energy in real time. So you can see here, I've got some devices, you know, right at the meter. And in my case, I'm on groundwater, so it was really important. I get no information about how much water I use being on groundwater. But here I can track, you know, to the day, to the month, to the hour, how much water is being used to make informed decisions on how to improve. And you can see the video there at the bottom, if you were watching it, that's me testing my kitchen sink in real time. You know, it bounces around, so you can see I get an average of 1.5. And I get some other data on the temperature coming in and how many gallons I've been using. And then on the bottom right, most useful is that if a leak does occur, I'll get alerts immediately to stop it before it gets out of control, or at least shut the water down if it's major before it becomes a huge issue as far as mold and mildew. So we highly encourage these devices to give people more information. And then next up in innovation in water, besides tracking and performance, is gray water. And so we're hoping to do a session with our friends at graywateraction.org. And then we've got some resources from EPA. But the gray water is very trendy, and the idea of it is to take reused water from the shower, from the laundry, from a condenser like an air conditioning or a dehumidifier, and, you know, put it somewhere else. So you might be moving shower and laundry to the toilet, and you might be moving toilet to and all that from the toilet then to the landscaping. So again, if gray water gets organic material in it, it becomes black water, which can be dangerous. So obviously taking a shower or washing your hands isn't going to cause organic material, but your sink and of course your toilet, you know, causes other, you know, black water issues, which we'll talk about in the next session. But these are some ways to reuse water that you can learn about, and that we hope to do some more sessions on. And then next up is rainwater catchment. And this again is the idea of just catching rainwater and storing it indoors or outdoors for either landscape or toilet flushing, or even ideally for potable use. Really, that has everything to do with your state or county or, you know, wherever you live's local laws on whether that's even allowed, which has been one of the biggest barriers. In some regards, catching rainwater is not legal. In many health regards, drinking rainwater or even putting it to the toilet is not legal, all just because of lack of awareness around health issues. And so our friends at the International Plumbing Code or International Council, ICC, Code Council, they both have rainwater standards that can now be adopted, that you can get adopted so you can do this. I've got the little place logo up there because another benefit to rainwater catchment could be stormwater mitigation. So imagine even if on all of our new buildings, we could reduce stormwater by catching the rainwater and then flush our toilets with it. That would even go a long way as just a starting point. And so if you want to learn more about that, we have a really popular session called The Basics of Rainwater Harvesting for Residential Use. So check that session out. We hope to do more of these sessions. You can watch at any time and learn a little bit more about some of the different opportunities and challenges that comes with rainwater catchment and reuse. So that, you know, covers testing water performance, and innovation in water. What questions do you have? And what other thoughts, innovative strategies do you have that I didn't cover here? I'd really like to hear from you. We'd love for you to post it down in the comment section and tell us a little bit more and engage in a conversation about that, so we can learn more. Well, that's going to conclude water. So we've covered, if you're going in order, we've covered energy, health, materials, and then back over there on the left, water. And so in the next session, we're going to get into place and go from there. So thank you for joining us. Join us for the next one. Make sure to take the quiz if you're getting your continuing ed or pursuing your certified green professional designation. Thank you. All right, well, welcome to our last pillar out of the 5 pillars of green building. We're going to be talking about place. And this pillar is really broken down in 4 areas: site review, construction design practices, landscaping, and really the values of the project team and those they choose to work with. In many cases, these are really big ideas that expand out to some extent globally. In many cases, these are things that you can't control, especially the smaller your project is. So there's might be little that you can do with it, but that you should at least be aware of it. And again, it's important to know that each of these pillars all work together, and it's important to try to maximize all the pillars. But in some cases, you'll see the pillars, contradict each other. So it'll be important to know what your client's goals are and which one you want to go after and maximize by trying to get, benefit all of them. So the first part of place is evaluating the site. And the first thing to do there is the flood risk factor. Unfortunately, and especially as we've most recently seen, floods are no longer obeying their federal guidelines. They're jumping their floodplain. So what used to be a 500-year floodplain is now a 100-year floodplain. What used to be 1,000 is now a 500-year floodplain. We know that the majority, at least in the U.S., of the east side of half of the country is starting to flood significantly more. But if you scale that way down, there are floods all over at any time. One of the most important things we can do is look at the flooding beyond the FEMA maps. FEMA may not be giving as best of details it could. It's been underfunded for a long time. And so one program we like to take a look at is the flood factor. And so you can see from there instantly how bad the flooding might be and what some types of actions can be taken to design or be resilient or potentially inform people to avoid that site, or at least get the proper insurance to avoid a potential financial catastrophe. So we need more resources on flooding, and we need to be more aware of where our flood zones are and what the risks are when we're evaluating any site and starting a project before we invest in that project. And unfortunately, now the same goes for fire. More and more fires are occurring in areas that you had never thought of. I just got off the phone with my local county planning department to ask about what they're doing. Even though I don't have really any risks of fire normally where I live, it is something that concerns me. One term you're going to start hearing more of is called the wildland urban interface, and that's kind of where these fires start to spark and move into urban areas. And so we're hoping to do a webinar here on this. We've got a link in there for an assessment tool that can be done, and using some strategies to keep your project and your community safe. We did this tour back in 2019 out in mid-Illinois, south of Chicagoland. And you can check it out on our website. But we met up with the owner on site, and he showed us and talked about some of the ways he designed this place for fire safety to protect against fire. And then also, which I thought was valuable to this course, talked a lot about rainwater catchment. If you can look there at the picture, you'll see a big rain barrel in the back there. So check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff on that video. And overall, we just need to evaluate what is going to happen in the future on that site as the climate gets more extreme. And that's all the way from humidity to dryness to drought to flooding to temperature increases to temperature decreases, and what's going to happen. And just be more informed as we plan the project and plan where you're going to build, to make sure that you're thinking that through for the life cycle of the building. So there's a lot of resources out there on people trying to make estimates of the future. One thought, as we can assume that the temperature is going to continue to increase, and I have the energy logo there. If you think back to the energy pillar section, we talked about right sizing our heating and cooling equipment. Well, the fact of the matter is we might need to oversize it in the sense of a modulating, so that as more extreme temperatures come, both hot and cold, we've got a system that's right sized to run the majority of the time, not overheating or cooling or overrunning, but then thinking through, okay, what's going to happen? How long is this heating system going to last, and what's going to happen in 10, 20 years? Do I need to think about boosting its capacity to handle some of these extreme temperatures like we've just recently seen, in the year 2021 in the summer all over the country and the world, and making sure that the capacity of the system can run to help keep people safe. Looking at existing lot and infill and making sure utilities are in place so they don't have to be brought in. What's going on in the surrounding development? Are we making the community better by building our project there? Is the project unique in that we're diversifying the community? So having a community that's not all commercial or all housing, having a diverse mix is always a healthier thing. So is there already too much housing within a certain mile radius, and does it need to be there? These are things to think through when you're doing your project. And I wanted to give a shout out to our members at Architectural Resource for this photo that they just posted. And this apparently is going to be the world's first Passive House certified 2021 zero energy single family residence, potentially in the world. So pretty cool stuff there in connection to this photo. Again, taking a look at density. Skipped ahead there. Looking at density, and usually looking at the green programs such as LEED, you're looking at anywhere from 30 dwelling units per acre all the way up to 120 dwelling units per acre to get your points. And the thing about density is that obviously at some point you can be too dense and you can build too high. There's some thoughts out there that building above 8 stories makes us lose our connection, our innate connection with the ground and the earth, and that larger buildings just take more energy and more water and more carbon embodied energy to sustain. So there's those trade-offs and those challenges, but having more density, helps ensure reduction of the need for transportation. And also, multifamily buildings inherently are always going to use less energy than single family just by the way they're built. So if you had a 2,000 square foot single family home and a 2,000 square foot multifamily unit, that 2,000 square foot multifamily unit in the same climate, is going to use a lot less energy, even if it has less energy efficiency features. And so it's much more efficient and much more easier to go electric and use heat pump applications because it has less heating demand, especially in cold weather climates. When you're evaluating a site, look for endangered species. Are you harming a species in your new build or your renovation? Can you make their life better, help them out? What's going on in that community? Look it up at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to learn more about where your project is and to see if you can be more helpful to whatever might be going on. We also, when you're building new, recommend avoiding prime farmland, so you're not taking away the important soils that we need, especially that we're losing at alarming rates that can be used to grow food. Try to consider that. Try to avoid building on parkland, which we need more of, and build near parkland, at least within a half-mile walk, if not closer, which can then help ensure people who live in more urban areas have that connectivity to parks and can be healthier, more active, and all that. Same with wetlands, try to avoid building on wetlands. We've got projects that are actually adjacent to wetlands and helping restore the wetlands. So we, if you can do that, even better. Looking at building near bus routes. And again, this is one of those cases where you say, this is just out of my control. Either there's a bus route that's walkable that someone can use, or there's not. Well, I wouldn't quite say that, because we have seen in some cases, you've got a big project coming in, you don't have a bus nearby. You can contact the city and say, look, we're bringing in all these residents to the community, and let's put a bus route in to help serve them. And so we've seen some limited success with doing that. Same goes with biking infrastructure. And this used to be one of the jokes about LEED. You'd put in a bike rack somewhere in a shady alley, nobody would use it, and you get a point. Well, now they've changed their program, and obviously we're talking about having the biking network in place. It's a safe biking network. It actually leads to somewhere people want to go. And then having safe shelters, safe storage areas within the building, whether it be a single family garage or a bike locker in a safe weather place that won't, get damaged by weather, have theft. So those are all important features of having a strong bike infrastructure that you can control to some extent on your project. A walk score is important as well. And so having a good walk score is something you can tout for your project and say, look, there's all these unique and diverse resources that you can get to really close by. They don't have to go far. And so you can use that walk score as something for points in green rating systems, and then also as a way to promote the walkability, of wherever your project is. Now, I have electric car charging infrastructure in the place section for a reason. You can see the little half energy logo down there, because at the end of the day, this is going to significantly increase your carbon emission, or not your carbon emissions. Well, yeah, it will increase your building's carbon emissions and your electric rates and bills. But overall, by a huge factor, reduce emissions if people are switching from gas to electric. So having the electric car infrastructure in your building is really a place issue, right? So place is really about having a sense of place, a connection to our community. That's really what the place pillar is all about, and how we make our local community, our local area, our city, all the way up to our globe a better place. And so having electric car infrastructure encourages more electrification, more people to buy cars. Having it for your tenants, having it for your owners is very important. So you want to make sure to get that built in. It's part of the equation of electrification, and there's a lot of incentives for it. I've got the health logo there because back to what we talked about in health with electromagnetic radiation, EMRs, might be some concern there. So just making sure that those electric infrastructures are not, especially not near sleeping areas during your design, is something that could be important to do. And then real briefly, thinking through your site, you're thinking through pest management and trying to avoid toxic pest control measures by thinking through many different strategies you could use. And this probably should have been in durability, because pests, ultimately will lead to building failures. But it's also a place thing as far as where your project is and evaluating what the pests might be. So installing a steel mesh barrier termite control system, a physical termite barrier, use solid concrete foundation, below grade masonry walls, install post-tension slabs, treat all cellulistic materials like wood framing with a borate pesticide that's safe, using non-cellulistic materials in the walls that won't be enticing to pests. Install port openings for all plumbing elements that penetrate the slab for inspections or inspection gaps around the project for inspectors to come in and see what's going on, and keep sealing everything up and putting on, again, steel meshes on openings and ports in the building, just to keep those pests out and to keep the building from rotting. So that completes the first part of the section of place as far as a site evaluation, site review. What is going on your site? What can you control? What you can't? So what kind of questions do you have for me? Put them down into the comment section. Look at other comments down there. Can you answer some of them or add some more thought to them? And then also, what are some ideas that you have on site evaluation that we didn't discuss here? Leave it below in the comments. All right, in this next section, we're going to talk about the construction and design process from a place standpoint. Obviously, putting in your plans, stormwater pollution control prevention, and then having on-site quality control in place to make sure these things are maintained. We see netting collapse all the time, big rains come through. You want to make sure you're not destroying the stormwater discharge during your construction practices. Here on the left is a bad example of sewer we found that didn't have the proper netting in it. On the right, here's one that's a good example where we've got that proper netting in place. So, there's all sorts of other things. If you've got steep slopes and you're building up soil that you've dug up, making sure you seed it or tarp it. If you've got a lot of dust getting kicked off from the site, you don't want to pollute the site around the community, so you want to spray it down. All sorts of different pollution prevention things you want to take a look at. We've got a link in from the LEAD program you can use to help give some ideas. Now, documentation is a huge part of green building certification. We're going to talk about that in some of the other continuing sessions. But just from a place standpoint, think about it this way. You want to have the entire project documented all the way behind the walls. So people who are trying to investigate an issue or an opportunity or want to do a renovation can kind of take a look and see what was done from photos or from products being used. So you want to have a really good documentation and photo documentation strategy in place, and then make sure that there's a good handoff to the owners or tenants or operators of the building so they can make informed decisions in the future to help keep the building alive. Make sure your workers are fully protected in all aspects, from on-site chemicals to safety issues to COVID-19, making sure it doesn't run rampant and they have the proper breathing and ventilation on site to make sure that they're not being exposed. What is the point of a healthy green building if the people building it, are exposed to any potential toxins or airborne viruses? We want to make sure they're protected and there's a plan in place as well. We want to make sure that during construction that there's training in place. LEED has a credit for this, and Enterprise Green Communities now requires it. It's called trades training. And so each of the unique subcontractors want to have training set up, especially on the first units that are getting finished. The insulator, the air sealer, the HVAC, the plumbing, electrical, landscape, renewables, you name it. What's going on that site? What do they need to know? How do they fit in? Typically, these are the folks that are not showing up to the design team meetings. And so we want to have training in place for them, on the job training on what it is they're doing, how they fit in, how they can make the project better, and how they can make themselves better and learn more and use it as a marketable skill from green building. During construction, you want to make sure that your ducts are covered really well. You can see here, if you look real closely, some blue plastic up, making sure that dust and dirt isn't getting pulled into the ducts and then sucked into the HVAC system. We just had a project where our rater was on site telling us about how this never happened. And so now the filters are super dirty and they're just kicking out some nasty air through the HVAC, and it reduces the life of the HVAC system. So again, you want to make sure these things are in place, and you want to make sure when construction is done that the ducts are cleaned out if there are ducts, and that the filters are changed as well. And just like documentation, you want to have an operation manual with that documentation, preferably virtual at this point, on how to operate that building. So when I bought my house, I didn't know a lot of things on how to keep it maintained, and I had to learn. I wish, just like when you buy a car, they hand you a manual. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to fix. Here's what you need to look out for. Here's what you need to call when there's an issue. We need to have that operation manual in place. And it can be, a binder. It can be a tab online. It can even be, we see some video tours and walkthroughs, which are getting help showing people how to maintain systems, or a combination of all of them. And also we need one for the tenant in the multifamily apartments, what are the things they need to do and know? And then we need one for the building manager and the operator as well. Another part of place is, you know, and about green building is showing off, right? So you want to show off your green building to everybody else and put up some signage on what you're doing, communicate it, why it's important, do a press release, do a green building tour, you name it. We see all sorts of folks doing pre-drywall tours, behind the drywall tours, mid-construction tours. These tours can be done with the community, with building professionals, and then also with the property managers as well as the site managers. And, you know, getting the folks who designed the building not only in the design stage coming together to understand what they're going to design and talking, but then also coming back together after construction to again put the training together on how to operate that building and then what to look for, and then working on any kind of lessons learned. And we love helping people put tours together, and especially virtual tours now. So we have a whole list of behind the scenes tours that you can check out on our YouTube channel. And then we hope to do more, and we hope to work with others if you've got an interesting building to put these tours on. So that concludes the second section of our place pillar out of the 4 sections we're going to talk about. What are some other practices, both in design and construction, that you recommend that we didn't cover here? What questions do you have? Drop them down below in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so for the third section, we're going to be talking about landscaping. And absolutely, as we talked about in the water pillar, landscaping can save a ton of water, if not be a 0 water application after it's established. But more than that, landscaping has a huge impact on the quality of life for the owner, the community, and perhaps even the planet at large from a lot of different applications. And so using drought tolerant, native landscaping, these are all important things that will again reduce water and help us reestablish soils, repair soils, put carbon into the soil out of the atmosphere depending on the plants you have, and make for aesthetics, make for a more beautiful place to look at, and all that. And so one thing I like to show is this LEED Platinum project here. This is a rural project. A lot of people say you can't certify a platinum building that's rural, but you can, especially if you use a lot of landscaping strategies in those rural areas that reduce water and improve the site. Now there's some videos here on the top and the bottom. And the things I want you to pay attention to in these videos, besides the crazy sound that you're probably hearing, is the grass there down below. The grass there down below is an actual sorry, here we're jumping ahead, a drought tolerant grass, and it is one that you don't have to mow and barely water. And the crazy thing about this grass here is, you know, when I showed up on site to do this building tour, you know, I didn't even know. I would have had no idea. It looks like just your standard, you know, your standard everyday Kentucky bluegrass. And so I'm going to skip there because of all the crazy sound. But if you go back and look at your handout, you'll see it. And, you know, again, we were very surprised to learn that it was a very special grass, and we're finding more and more opportunities out there that you can have your grass and use it to, you know, use it to be drought tolerant, low mow. And if you've got clients who still want to have that normal looking grass, there's a lot of different seed mixes, clovers we're hearing about, different prairie seed grasses, and then again, some standard grasses that you can find that look just like Kentucky blue. And again, you don't have to mow them or water them as much. Now on to this photo. This is one of our lead projects, and I'm thankful they just sent me this photo because they just received their certification, and you can get an extra bonus point for it in lead. This is a certified wildlife habitat. So again, talking about benefits to nature when we're talking about our landscaping. So there are many plants that can be drought tolerant, and they can help restore and protect local fragile ecosystems, such you might think of butterflies or birds or bees as some of the low-hanging fruit, but it's really subjective to where you're at. So if you head over to the National Wildlife Foundation, you can check out this certified wildlife habitat. They give you tips and tricks and pointers on how to design your local landscape to protect nature and boost it. And then if you show in your plans and verify that you actually did it, they will give you a little plaque there you can put up. And again, you can achieve some extra points in lead in the GreenStar program. And then again, you know, like I said, catching rainwater reduces water. It helps the land. We reduce stormwater. So we want that stormwater to get retained in rain barrels, to go into some sort of catchment, to go into a rain garden, to go into toilets, you know, all of the above. Stopping stormwater can be a huge benefit for both water and place. And some of the things you need to know here is something called the 60th percentile or the 90th percentile or the 95th percentile. Enterprise Green Communities wants you to be at least at 60. LEED starts rewarding you at 90 and then 95. This is basically the amount of water that's going to come down during a huge rain event and overwhelm a system. Just this is a very novice overview of my limited understanding of how it works. I've got a link there to the EPA on a whole huge document on how to design a project and what you need to be looking for. Some jurisdictions mandate that you hit these percentiles, but again, you want to keep that stormwater out from causing, you know, pollution getting in and wrecking our local lakes and causing potentially what I've heard of dangerous airborne toxic algae in some cases that can be harmful to humans if we don't stop this from happening. So I've got the health logo there for that reason, and also the health logo again because if you're you know, catching rainwater and using it for potable reasons, it could actually be more healthy than groundwater or city water if filtered correctly. And we need to establish more food gardens, right? And so we need to start growing more food locally. And so anytime we can do a project that is, you know, incorporates food on site. So first, from the design standpoint, is there enough room for food? Is there enough solar exposure? This is a design issue. You know, if a person's home or multifamily apartment or wherever isn't designed for food, well, it's going to be very difficult for them to grow food from the first place. So thinking through, where could food go? And then from the construction standpoint, can we put in infrastructure, raised beds, you know, whatever your local food strategy is, this can be built into the project. And again, yes, it's up to the operators and owners to maintain it. Absolutely. But if it's not designed right, not built in, that makes it even more difficult, especially with how busy we are these days to try to grow food. And then back to the stormwater piece, we're talking about permeable pavers. So we can convert all of our concrete over to permeable pavers and have water infiltrate the ground. We've seen this go into rainwater catchment features or rain gardens, but make sure again that it's not getting into the stormwater and it's getting into the ground and it's not causing flooding through certain types of permeable pavers. And then lastly, you can see here on the right, I'm measuring on a lead project how far away the new plant is away from the foundation. And you can see on the left there, you know, a multifamily project where we've got sort of our ideal situation where we're keeping our plants as far away as we can. At least 18 inches is where lead gives you a point, but as far as way we can from the foundation of a site, so that way we don't have water entry and pest entry and all that. So again, when you're doing your landscaping plan, try to get any kind of plants, even grass, away from the foundation and the base of the project. So that concludes our third section of the place pillar, looking at landscaping opportunities, just a broad overview of landscaping. We're going to be doing a lot more sessions on landscaping. I think some of you have a lot to share about what you do with your landscaping that's innovative, and maybe you want to share that below on things I didn't cover. What questions do you have for me, or what do you, in any of these cases, what do you disagree with or have constructive criticism on as far as what we taught on here? Please leave it below in the comments. So last, we're going to be talking about, in the place pillar, operations, both for your own business and for the businesses that you work with, as far as how you conduct yourself and how you take your product that you're building or remodeling from a green building, and then expand that to a much larger global framework. So the first thing is to consider your own internal operations. And so, or the operations of the vendors you work with and use. Some different certifications that exist out there is B Corporation, which can be thought of as like LEED certification for your business model. And it's a real certification. It's a real incorporation. And it basically states, hey, we're an organization that gives back, that pays our employees fairly, that reduces our carbon emissions, and that, you know, donates to the community and supports nonprofits. And so it's a rating system you can use, open source and free, to kind of look at your own business operations. And then if you achieve certain milestones on the triple bottom line, so that's people, planet, and profit, you can certify to a B Corporation and then maintain that. Again, you can ask your vendors to do likewise. Hey, we want to do business with a certified organization. We'd appreciate it if you got this certification and looked at your own internal operations. And the same goes for an alternative here from our friends at the International Living Future Institute. They have something called JUST, and you can see it's sort of like an ingredients label that's sort of set up like B Corp too, but you can see here they give you out a scoring system based on all these different features: diversity and inclusion, equity, employee health, employee benefits, stewardship, and your supply chain. So again, this is another label. It's certainly not as popular as B Corp by any means, but also pretty cool. And another thing you can take a look at if you want to have another way to measure the sustainability of your internal operations, not just your product of your home, your renovation, your building product, but your own internal operations, and or those you work with. And then from there, once you've looked at you're building green, you're doing your self-assessment. Now we need you to help advocate for green building. And there are there's local needs, there's community needs, there's neighborhood scale needs, there's state needs, territory needs, county needs, regional, federal, and global needs, as what it is we can do to advance green building. And advancing green building through advocacy and lobbying may not necessarily mean that you're trying to adopt new incentives or policies. It may also mean that we're trying to roll back policies that get in the way of building green. So for example, thinking back to our energy pillar, thinking back to solar power, where I'm at in my community, we have laws on the books that basically throttle back how much solar that can be built in our state of Michigan, which is crazy to think about. When the year comes around at the end, everybody's got a lot of anxiety because they can't build any more solar and they have to basically just stop until the year resets. So that's a crazy policy where we think, what, this is in the way of green building. How do we roll this back? Or like I said earlier, in water, there are jurisdictions that don't allow you to catch rainwater, even if you wanted to use it to stop stormwater. There's jurisdictions and health departments that don't allow you to drink rainwater, even if it's proven safe. So those are things we may want to look at or roll back. And in other cases, we might want to look at green building tax credits, green building tax abatements like we see in Cincinnati, Ohio, which work very successfully to expand green building and reduce people's tax income costs, which is a win-win, and it has helped spur investment. or other things to help establish net zero policies or zero carbon policies, we need you to get engaged locally. And you can do this through other organizations such as the Building Performance Association, BPA, USGBC, national or chapters, International Living Future Institute. We're part of a network called the Energy Efficiency for All Network through the Michigan Energy Efficiency for All Network that's been doing a lot of good to help ensure everyone gets access to healthier, low income, low utility bills as well. So join a network, get engaged and advocate. And we can find that no matter what political background you come from, there are ways we can work together to knock these barriers down. And lastly, something to think about, but the reality is the entire environmental movement has had a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. And the reality is we've been pretty white. And so there's a lot of reasons for that, but we need to recognize our own shortcomings and find ways to engage other people. And the reason we need to engage other people is because we, need to get other diverse opinions at the table on how to build greener. So the environmental movement, the green building movement, is a subset of the environmental movement who's just as bad at this. And we need to understand, first of all, the lived experience of people from different backgrounds and cultures and locations and communities. And so that way we can understand exactly what their needs are and how to build better and greener and get them engaged. And so the idea here is something called JEDI. So I'm a Star Wars fan, but I love this repurposing of JEDI, this idea of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. And those are huge words that have a lot of meaning that I don't frankly understand myself, but I'm trying to better understand. But we have a link in there to someone from an article from the International Living Future Institute, to someone that we've actually worked with in the past too from USGBC, or recently came from USGBC. And she's got a lot of thoughts in there just as a starting place to get into this and to say, how do we engage others and bring more people to the table? And then also we know that people from communities of colors are more adversely impacted by air pollution, by climate change, by lack of access to affordable housing, energy efficient housing. They have the highest utility burden, have the highest health impact from healthier housing, from unhealthy housing. And so not only do we engage more people, then we need to help figure out how do we get those people who are engaged from diverse backgrounds to help assist those who are not benefiting from the green building movement, because we believe everyone should have access to a green home. So that's important. And I wanted to end on that note because we need to improve our sense of place by ensuring everyone has access. And so that really is all 5 pillars of green. If you've watched all of these: energy, health, materials, water, and place being last, but certainly not least. We need to maximize all of these pillars to improve each one when we're doing green building projects. The green building certification programs seek to do just that, especially as you go up higher tiers, higher levels. And so we're going to be talking a lot more about these programs, how they compare, how you can use them as tools to maximize the 5 pillars of green, and recognize that there are trade-offs and figure out which trade-off is necessary for your client from there. So if you've been watching these sessions, you can take the quiz on the Thinkific channel. You can take the quiz on the USGBC channel. You can get the 80% passing rate and then procure your certificate. And as always, huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our new executive director, Jose Reina, everyone who allows us to do what we do, as well as our top tier sponsors, Mitsubishi Electric, Build Equinox, and Rheem, all helping you build better and greener. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'd love for you to drop down into the chat any other questions or comments that you have on some of these things we just recently covered, as far as business practices, as far as advocacy, as far as justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. What ideas do you have? What didn't I cover? What did I miss? What don't you agree with? Or just anything. We'd love to hear from you and your feedback. And we want to learn from you, and we want to help others build better by working with you to do that. So please join us for our next upcoming sessions, and take care, stay safe, and be well.